We are now up to staff reports and Dr. Donahue.
Yeah, usually at this meeting I consider the budget presentation proposal to be my staff report, and I'll do that again this year.
I think that's fair, and that brings us to Greg.
My report is on the screen. It's also on the back of your budget books that you received tonight. The property tax levy cap calculation is required to be submitted to the state controller by March 1st. So even before we had this presentation, it was due to the controller. I think it's somewhat ironic, the timing of this. This is this year's calculation that will determine whether we need a 50% vote or a 60% supermajority. And this is the actual calculation. It includes the tax-based growth factor. It backs out pilots, transfers to capital, and other capital expenses net of their aid. It's then multiplied by the CPI, which this year is capped at 0.12, so virtually zero. And then we can we subtract out our pilots that we have in our budget, and we haven't talked about revenue yet, but they're already in here, so obviously I've done some work on revenue. And then we have the exemptions, and the exemptions again are the capital tax levy, that's our debt service, net of building aid. So they want to see what the local effort is, as they call it, what taxes are actually paying for, because we do receive a state aid on building aid. Also the transfer to capital, which is the number that Steve's going to talk to you about, and I referenced tonight, that $485,000. And finally the net bus and other transportation equipment purchases, they're considered capital, so I net out a transportation aid from that. So the bottom line is that our maximum allowable tax levy, requiring just a simple majority, is $77,724,100, which is 0.4% of an increase in taxes is what's allowed.
Would you say that again?
0.4. This is 0.43, if we want to be precise. 0.43. Remember what I presented tonight. I know you all listened very closely. It's a 1.3% increase in our budget. So there is a difference there. So that difference is made up by other revenues, state aid, other things like interest earnings, and also obviously our reserves. So that's kind of a coming attractions that we'll talk about in detail on March 22nd. So there is that structural difference between what this allows, and this is doing it exactly as we did in prior years, and what we will need in terms of that difference, and that has to come from somewhere.
You can see just, a little like preview how districts are in big trouble.
Right,
Not
there's a lot,
our district,
there's
but
a
you
lot
can
of
see.
people that are upset today because they're just filing it today and realizing that
Wow,
they really can't do much with their
there's a
taxes.
big gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense yet of the magnitude of the towns that are going to do overrides this year? It's probably a little
No,
soon
but
to know.
there's a lot of distressed districts out there that are really struggling right now. There's so many overlays of different things going on. The state controller is doing their mandatory audits. They're not doing it just to come out and harass people. They're required to audit schools. And they're all saying if you do have a fund balance, they're all very critical of schools that have fund balances. And if you're just one check away from being broke, they're very happy with those schools. So it's really a strange financial environment that we're in. It just, fiscally, it's not appropriate, I think, for what we're charged to do, which is educate the children of our community and maintain program and safety and buildings and property values. I mean, they're all related. So it's troubling from what you see, but there's a lot of distressed schools out there, and the stories will just be coming out now that this is due today. And there'll be reports in the paper, I'm sure, very quickly, because this is public document. So I just wanted to see what it looks like.
For the allowable tax levy growth factor, lesser CPI or 2%, so you get a 0.12. So that's the CPI number?
That's the official CPI.
What is that, a month? That's not a monthly, that's a published CPI number?
Yeah, that's an annual number through the calendar year of 2015. It's released by Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's for all urban consumers for U.S. cities. Has nothing to do with New York State, has nothing to do with
The national
our region.
CPI, okay.
It's very, I'm sure they went through some study, I hope they did, and figure out which one they're going to use.
Is it ironically a point that the national published CPI over the last 12 months is 1.2%, not 0.12? I mean, it's mind-numbing.
It is.
So, okay.
And that's a limiting factor. What really helped Byram Hills out is our tax base growth factor, the second number on this
Yep.
report, which is 1.01. It's one of the highest ones in Westchester County, and it relates to new brick and mortar, not changes in assessed values.
The development, basically.
So that's actually really helped us. It gave us approximately $750,000 of ability to increase taxes. Our budget increase is approximately $1.2 million, so you start to do the math on this. This is worth about $400,000 overall, $500,000. I mean, so there's some disparities in terms of being able to fund it through just the tax levy and fund the operations through it. But we'll talk about that in detail.
And revenue is our next meeting or in 2
March
different-
22nd.
22nd, okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. And that brings us to Jim. Oh, Tim, sorry.
Okay, in just a brief update. If you'll recall, a few weeks ago I reported that the governor's task force had made some recommendations on some actions for the state education department. And last week, State Ed just made a presentation to the Board of Regents on a proposed implementation timeline for reviewing the Common Core standards. So they are in that process, and that will take place over the course of the next year. They will look at the K-12 standards in math and ELA. Following year, they plan to implement the standards, roll them out, start training in the region, and then they're proposing in 2018-19 new grades 3 through 8 tests aligned to those new standards. So I'm watching that carefully, and I mention it because I mentioned last week we are taking on a K-5 math study. So I'll be watching as we go through that study. I'm going to go forward with that study, but I'm going to be looking at the standards process to see how dramatically they change. I don't anticipate it changing too much, but it seems like all the feedback was given toward the elementary building. So if anything's going to change, it's probably somewhere K-4 based on the feedback. We also just spent 3 years realigning and redoing our K-5 ELA curriculum and spending a lot of time and resources on that as well. So I'll be looking at any changes there, and we'll have to do some adjustments. Don't think they're going to be broad sweeps. I don't think they're going to completely do 180 degrees. So probably be tweaking, so hopefully it's not too much to take on. But I wanted to give you that update to let you know how state policy influences the things we're doing and time we've already spent over the past many years studying.
And that timeline that they gave, is that a timeline that you think is doable for our district?
I think what I worry about is the implementation of those state tests aligned to new standards. If they make the same mistake they did before,
There's
where
not
they
a whole
give
lot
us
of time.
There's not. They don't
Yeah.
roll them out incrementally. What they do is say, okay, here's a year to do the standards. Now we're going to test K-8 on those new standards in a year. Then you don't have time to phase that in and from year
Right.
to year. They
Remember-
made that mistake dramatically the last time, and that's why
Right.
we got to this fiasco in the outreach.
I remember it was like 6 months, right? You put the new curriculum in, and then you're testing in the spring.
Yeah, so you're testing 8th grade students on curriculum that they didn't have
Half a year.
K-7
Right.
Right.
on these new
Well,
And
they
elements.
do.
the new regime recognizes that verbally.
They recognize
So
it.
it'll just be a matter of seeing what they do.
Okay.
There was an asterisk on this timeline that says it's incumbent upon receiving funding to support this timeline.
Yeah, I noticed
I
that.
find that curious, and
Yeah,
they
me
also made a
too.
comment in the presentation of the Board of Regents saying that standards are a living document. So I have a feeling this could be our new reality, that we're going to
Changing
be
constantly.
in this phase of just evolving standards over time.
And
Just-
it also sounds like they're rebranding it. That
They're
pretty soon we're
definitely
gonna get
rebranding
something
it. They will
different than
lose the
Common Core.
yeah, they're going to call it the New York
Right.
State Learning Standards.
Ah, okay. But we all know what they are.
So they can get rid of that Common
Basically
Core
the
label
same.
that has negative connotations to the public.
Can't blame them, okay.
The good thing is math doesn't change, meaning that math is math, right? It's amazing how much,
Math pedagogy.
They manage
how many
it.
times, and if you wait long enough, the
Changes.
same standards will be in place that were 5 years ago, so that's the other strategy.
Pick out the old book.
Yeah.
Put away the
Take
new
up the
book.
slide.
Yeah.
Wow,
All right.
thank you. Jen?
Just wanted to update you on our hiring processes. As you know, Cheryl is going to be retiring this summer. You run into a little bit of a conundrum when you're working with civil service competitive positions. For example, when somebody in a competitive position such as Cheryl retires, technically you are not allowed to request a list from civil service until that person has vacated the position, because it's their safeguard that you don't have two people in a position at the same time. However, we can apply for some special waiver, which we will do, to receive that competitive list 2 months before Cheryl leaves. That list consists of people who have taken the test for that title and who have passed. There are currently 2 lists. One has 3 people on it. We are obligated, if we canvass letters to these people, to actually provide interviews for these people, and you're also obligated to take somebody from this list. So it's not a case where we may know somebody who has some expertise and can bring them in. If they're not on this competitive list, we can't use them. The however is that we are posting for the position anyway starting tomorrow, because if we are able to identify a candidate who is currently in this position in another district, we can actually offer them this position. So that's going to be our first approach, to see if there's anybody who is currently in a position. And then the next approach will be to secure that list. So we're hopeful, but it's more of a daunting task than looking for anybody else.
Wow, okay, thank you. Okay, and that brings us to board reports. And I attended, as the Board of Ed rep, Jen's district-wide safety team meeting, which happened last week. And I have to say that it's really reassuring to know all the various plans that are in place for the district to keep our district safe and to react as needed. So that was comforting. It was a great meeting. And just a quick, I won't get into details because I'm sure Ira will, but I want to congratulate our sports teams tonight. Hopefully they're doing well. And and those still competing in the winter sports. And pretty soon we start our spring season. And we also have a lot of exciting things happening in debate. A lot of kids doing incredibly well in debate, and Science Olympiad and science research. The accolades are still coming in, so all good things. I'll move it to committee and board reports. Does anybody have a committee and board report?
I went to the Westchester delegation meeting. After all, I was able to make it with all of the state senators and assemblymen from our area. And the big takeaways are, I think there was a fairly positive, upbeat message around GEA restoration. So it seems like that continues to move forward, although, you know, who knows until it's
We'll
done.
see.
But they seemed upbeat about it. They were certainly not upbeat about, not surprising, about any sort of change to the tax cap legislation. I don't mean by blowing it away, but just like little tweaks to it that just isn't going to happen in an election year. And on the APPR issue, I would say they were probably doubtful that there was going to be anything from the legislature, because the governor continues to have the position that he doesn't want to reopen the legislation. It doesn't mean that there won't be lots of activity with the Board of Regents and with the State Education Department around trying to tweak things, but it didn't seem like there was a ton of momentum for a law change. Now, I'm sure this is all fluid and it can change 10 times before the budget vote, but that's where things were about, what, a week and a half ago or so when this meeting happened. And then they just reiterated the obvious point that advocacy is critical, and they definitely want communities to reach out and write letters, and it'll matter, especially getting to the governor's office and you know, various constituencies. I guess the last thing is just on the Board of Regents elections. That was the other big topic and focus, and I think they all felt good that there was a feeling in the Assembly and the Senate that they wanted to choose candidates that are going to be more sympathetic to the view that we all share here, and so that was positive.
Thank you. Ira?
Well, I have some good news for Byron Mills, and this is a live report, actually. Well, first of all, congratulations to the boys basketball team for winning the third section of the championship in school history, their second in 6 years. They won, beating Tappan Zee 46-45 Sunday night, and really one of the more thrilling sporting events I've seen in some time. The atmosphere at the county center was electric, both from Tappan Zee and Byram Hills. It was just it's a fantastic game. I had the privilege really being able to do it for Bobcat TV with my sidekick being the town supervisor. So that was a lot of fun. So that win propelled Byram into the regional play, and they're playing Section 9 Red Hook. And as we speak, Byram leads by 10 points, 53-43 in the last few seconds of the game, which means that Byram Hills will go to the regional final, which I believe is up in Cortland. And if they win that, they will return for the second time in school history to the state Final Four. For a team that's relatively young, this is really a young team. Coach Reaper is just a miracle worker, and the kids just did great. And considering how hard it is to, 48 hours after such an emotional win, control yourself and get yourself mentally ready to play another playoff game, it's not easy, but they've done it. And unless there's some 5-point plays in the offing, it looks like the team will advance. So congratulations to Ted Reaper, David Mack, and the rest of the coaching staff, and congratulations to the players. Just a fantastic run they've had, again, for a team that's young. And as I said, the last meeting, we are the defending state champions in baseball, and Coach Saunders will return to defend the title just in a couple weeks. I mean, practices start pretty soon. There's no snow out there, so we may get lucky with getting the kids to play. And the spring has a lot of other opportunities. Obviously, lacrosse, girls softball, a lot of action. It's always great to come out, so please come out and support these sport teams. But Cortland and now Glens Falls a long way away, but if you have a chance to make and go up there, I think you'll be rewarded with just a wonderful atmosphere and really what sports is. And the last point I want to make is that what some people missed is the relationship between the Byram Hills and Tappan Zee coach. They really have enormous professional respect for each other, and that was evident throughout the game. No matter what happened, they really demonstrated, I thought, terrific sportsmanship, and that rubbed off on their players. So even more important than the wins and losses are the lessons that these kids are learning in such a high-charged event. So congratulations to them.
Thank you. That is exciting.
Yep, it is.
Okay. Policy Committee is meeting on March 7th. Town Liaison had a meeting last week. Anybody else?
We have a West Putt board meeting a week from Thursday, and I anticipate that we're going to approve a short public service announcement that Dr. Brenda Myers has helped put together, a little video which will have links to some voter voice letters on school financing and unfunded mandates and things like that. So I just offer that as something to contemplate sticking on the website, on the advocacy page that we're contemplating creating, a place where we can put links for those people who are interested in getting more information or writing a letter to their legislator or taking a more active approach.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
53-45 final. So the boys did
There you
it.
go.
Done?
Congratulations to the
Yay.
boys. They played Johnson City, wherever that is, Saturday, 6:30 p.m. in Cortland. So
That's exciting.
very excited.
Good
To go to
stuff.
regional final is pretty thrilling.
Yay. Okay.
Only, let's see, 8 teams left in the whole state playing basketball.
It's amazing.
Class A. It's pretty cool.
Very good. Okay. Are there any topics for future agendas or requests for information? Okay, hearing none. Communications to the board. There was an email that I forwarded to the board from a community member in regard to busing. Any other? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve our Board of Education minutes from February 9, 2016?
So moved.
In a second? Second. Were there any changes? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Donna? Okay, and the board met in executive session prior to our public session to discuss the 4 items that I mentioned earlier. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Okay, all in favor? Good night. Thank you for watching.